What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. We are officially over and done with all of the WWE premium live events, and although we've had some great premium live events, there may have been some stinker events, especially with deciding what should be the main event. And so for today's episode, I'm going to determine what if every WWE premium live event main event was different, not only throughout the main roster, but also the NXT events too. And I thought this would be a good yearly video since the videos I've done of every WrestleMania, Survivor Series, SummerSlam, a lot of those events that have multiple events did not feature the 2024 renditions of those events, so that's how I'm gonna keep up with those videos, is doing this on a yearly basis. And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share this to all your friends, subscribe, and press the notification bell for when future episodes get released, and leave a comment down below about today's topic or suggesting a future topic for an episode of Pro Wrestling What If. So we're kicking off with the Royal Rumble, which the main event was the 30-man Royal Rumble match, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been the Fatal 4-Way match with AJ Styles, LA Knight, Randy Orton, and Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. Now, although I wanted to go with the 30-woman Royal Rumble match, we have seen in the past that based off of storyline aspect of the bloodline, that they are likely to take the main event spot. Even for 2023's event, the main event was the Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens match rather than any of the Royal Rumble matches itself. And I think with this match, even still with Cody Rhodes winning the Royal Rumble, he could come out after this match and basically point at Roman Reigns, signaling that he's going to challenge him at WrestleMania. NXT Vengeance Day. The main event was Trick Williams versus Ilya Dragunov for the NXT Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Roxanne Perez versus Lyra Valkyria for the NXT Women's Championship. And of course, I know that there is one additional person, which is why I think this would be the main event, because of that surprise element of Lola Vice cashing in that breakout tournament championship contract, turning it into a triple threat match, Elimination Chamber Perth. The main event was Nia Jax versus Rhea Ripley for the Women's World Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been the Elimination Chamber match with Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair, Liv Morgan, Naomi, Raquel Rodriguez, and Tiffany Stratton, where the winner got a Women's World Championship match at WrestleMania 40. Now, of course, the huge reason of Rhea Ripley main eventing was because of the event taking place in her home country of Australia. And with the Women's Chamber match main eventing in this case, this still can create the opportunity for Rhea Ripley to appear after the match and closing out the show in her home country with a stare down with the winner Becky Lynch before WrestleMania 40. NXT Stand and Deliver. The main event was Trick Williams versus Carmelo Hayes, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Tony D'Angelo versus Ilya Dragunov for the NXT Championship. Now, this usually is a case of the fact that the World Championship in most cases should main event a show, but of course, with Carmelo and Trick, their storyline is what drove that match to be the main event. But also, of course, Ilya Dragunov, who really at this time was topping off him as terms to match quality. WrestleMania 40 Night 1, more specifically, the main event was Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns and The Rock in the tag team match, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Sami Zayn versus Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. Now, this would be in a world where somehow The Rock didn't make an appearance at WrestleMania 40 at all. And realistically, you could slide in the World Heavyweight Championship match that was in Night 2. However, I'm just dealing with the cards that are dealt to me with what actually happened with Night 1, so I think with putting what ended up being the semi-main event of the show being the main event makes sense, especially with Triple H's book booking where he has put non-world title matches in the main event slot of WrestleMania, with the prior year being for the undisputed tag team championships. And then this would also mean that Sami Zayn got to main event WrestleMania 2 years in a row. Then WrestleMania 40 Night 2, the main event was Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns in Bloodline Rules for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. I think it would make sense for the World Heavyweight Championship match to main event, not only because this is another world title, but of course because of the moment that happened after that with Damian Priest cashing in Money in the Bank, making it the second time in WrestleMania history for that to happen. Backlash France. The main event was AJ Styles against Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Kevin Owens and Randy Orton against Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga in the tag team street fight. Now, realistically, I could have put the World Heavyweight Championship match with Jey Uso and Damian Priest, but I think in this case there isn't enough star power for WWE to want to put that as the main event. So especially with the ongoing Bloodline storyline being the biggest storyline of the company, that it's likely that would have taken place as the main event of the show, especially with this specific match being a tag team street fight. So a lot of chaos happening would have made sense for the main event. King and Queen of the Ring. The main event was Logan Paul against Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Gunther versus Randy Orton in the King of the Ring tournament finals. This is one of those decisions that I thought was so random to not have literally what your event is based off of as the main event. I get it that in most cases the world title should be the main event, but I think in these certain cases that the King of the Ring tournament finals should have been the main event, especially with enough star power between both Gunther and Randy Orton for that match. NXT Battleground Las Vegas. The main event was Ethan Page against Trick Williams for the NXT Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Jordynne Grace versus Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's Championship. Now, I think one thing we can all agree is that the women's division in NXT absolutely cooks, and I wouldn't be surprised, especially with that surprise announcement of a TNA superstar like Jordynne Grace being a part of the main event, especially because we did end up seeing another TNA superstar main event in NXT PLE later on in the year, Clash at the Castle Scotland. The main event was Drew McIntyre versus Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been AJ Styles versus Cody Rhodes in the I Quit match for the undisputed WWE Championship. Now, this is also a case that the world title main evented, considering that Drew McIntyre's home country was in Scotland. But I think if somehow Clash at the Castle didn't happen in Scotland, I think a huge match that had a gimmick stipulation like I Quit would have likely been the main event, especially knowing how good both Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles are in the ring, that they could have easily been the main event, hence why they were the main event of Backlash France in the first place. Money in the Bank. The main event was Cody Rhodes, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton against Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Jacob Fatu in the six-man tag team match, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Seth Rollins against Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, in a perfect world, I would have liked to put the men's Money in the Bank ladder match as the main event, and that is for the simple fact that this would result in Drew McIntyre not making the same night cash-in and failing to do so. But I do feel like it was the plan for the failed cash-in to happen so that they set up for CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre at SummerSlam. So in order for WWE to still plant the seeds for that, that would mean that the Damian Priest Seth Rollins match would have to happen as the main event. They kind of put themselves in a corner there with that certain stipulation. NXT Heatwave. The main event was Ethan Page, Javon Evans, Shawn Spears, and Trick Williams in a fatal four-way match for the NXT Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Wes Lee against Obafemi in the last chance match for the NXT North American Championship. And not only because, of course, the NXT North American Championship would be the next best title on the roster, but in most cases, if your stipulation is a last chance match, a lot of times it could end up being the main event of a show. One example I could think of is the match between Batista and King Booker at Survivor Series 2006 for the World Heavyweight Championship. And especially after seeing that absolutely ridiculous F5 that Wesley took from Obafemi, who the absolute was going to top off that match, honestly. SummerSlam. The main event was Solo Sikoa versus Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre with Seth Rollins as the special guest referee. Now, this is also living in a world where Roman Reigns does not make his return during this match, because inevitably that's why it was the main event. But with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre's story being the next biggest storyline of the company, this likely would have been a main event, especially with the interaction involving the three even planting the seeds for the inevitable Seth Rollins versus CM Punk match down the line. Bash in Berlin. The main event was Randy Orton versus Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre in the strap match. Once again, I think based off of storyline aspect that this would make sense as the main event of the show. You can make an argument about the Kevin Owens-Cody Rhodes match for the WWE Championship, but I think because Kevin Owens at that point was a babyface and not the full-fledged heel we're currently seeing, that made sense to not be the main event. But especially with this match having CM Punk ending up tying the series 1-1, that could have been a cool way to end off the show. NXT No Mercy. The main event was Joe Hendry against Ethan Page for the NXT Championship. But had it not been that match, I think it would have been Tony D'Angelo versus Obafemi for the NXT North American Championship. Not only once again is my argument about the North American title being the next best title, but who the hell was cooking more than Obafemi at this particular point? The monster of a man that is Obafemi, that is just absolutely freaking crazy, and that he realistically should be the main event of any show, whether he has a title or not. But of course, with the beginning of that storyline involving Tony D'Angelo and Obafemi, it would have made sense for them to be the main event had it not been the huge draw that was Joe Hendry from TNA to be involved in the NXT Championship match. Bad Blood. The main event was Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns against Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu in the tag match, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre inside Hell in a Cell. I think we can all universally agree is that if there was one WWE PLE that we wish was the main event of the show, it would definitely be this Hell in a Cell match between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. To a lot of people's opinions, it may be one of the greatest Hell in a Cell matches of all time. Every Bad Blood pay-per-view / PLE that has happened prior was main evented by a Hell in a Cell match, and Bad Blood is the definition to describe the feud between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. NXT Halloween Havoc. The main event was Ethan Page versus Trick Williams in a Devil's Playground match for the NXT Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Obafemi versus Tony D'Angelo in the Tables, Ladders, and Scares match for the NXT North American Championship. Of course, that promo segment that basically mimicked Rocky had happened at this point, which continued to further the storyline. Plus, once again, like I mentioned earlier with Obafemi, he should be the main event of literally any match, whether with a title or not. Crown Jewel. The main event was Cody Rhodes versus Gunther for the Men's Crown Jewel Championship, but had it not been that match, I think it would have been Roman Reigns and the Usos against Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Jacob Fatu in the 6-man tag team match. I was dead set on thinking that this 6-man tag team match was going to be the main event. And it kind of makes me upset that with a championship that absolutely nobody cares about at all ended up being the main event of the show. So I feel like with storyline aspects that the Bloodline storyline should have been the main event of Crown Jewel. Survivor Series War Games. The main event was Roman Reigns, the Usos, Sami Zayn, and CM Punk against the Bloodline and Bronson Reed in the Men's War Games match. But had it not been that match, I think it would have been Rhea Ripley Bayley, Bianca Belair, Naomi, Io Sky, and Bayley against Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, Nia Jax, Tiffany Stratton, and Candice LeRae in the Women's War Games match. Now, I think this would be the situation with every Survivor Series going forward, where basically if it's not the Men's War Games match, it would be the Women's War Games match based on how long that match type is and the amount of crazy stuff that can happen during that match. And the final PLE being NXT Deadline. The main event was Ethan Page, Javon Evans, Nathan Frazier, Obafemi, and Wes Lee in the Men's Iron Survivor match to determine the #1 contender for the NXT Championship. But had it not been that match, I think it would have been Julia, Sol Ruka, Stephanie Vaquer, Ren Sinclair, and Zarya in the Women's Iron Survivor Challenge to determine the #1 contender for the NXT Women's Championship. So basically, just like I mentioned with Survivor Series War Games, that if it wasn't the women's match in this case, that I think it would have been the men's match that would have ended up main eventing NXT Deadline.